Now, lamb shanks are incredibly easy to make, and when done right, they'll melt in your mouth like butter. So this year for Easter, we're gonna be making braised lamb shanks over a bed of creamy polenta with a little bit of gremolata on top. Easy to prepare, you can make it ahead of time, and everyone at Easter will love it. So let's just jump right into it. Now we're gonna make this recipe for about 4 people, and you can obviously easily scale this up. But all we got is some stock, some wine, a little bit of flour to give it a little bit of body, some onion, carrot, tomato paste, bay leaf, rosemary, and garlic. Very simple. We just need to chop up the carrots, the onion, and the garlic very roughly. We're just going for the flavor of these vegetables. They're gonna get strained out later, so the way we cut them doesn't matter so much. Just gonna give these a quick wash. And then I don't peel. I want that skin, the flavor, the nutrients, all that good stuff. Just gonna give it a really rough cut. Same thing with the onion, you just wanna give it a nice rough cut. You can cut the stem and the root of the onion, cut the onion in half, and then slice each half down the middle. Just cut them into large chunks. And then for the garlic, we're gonna take about a head, just give them a quick smash to expose them from their paper. We don't have to do much to them. And we can just get all of that into a bowl. This is a nice Montepulciano. It's Easter, you gotta whip out the nice bottle. Let that wine breathe a little bit. It's a good one. So we're gonna set this off to the side. Now let's talk about the lamb shanks. Lamb in general has a gamey flavor. The shanks, because they're a tougher cut of meat, have a little bit more of a gamey flavor. They hold up to lots of spices. Clove, cinnamon, cumin, rosemary, mint. These are all classic flavor profiles that go well with lamb. Usually for Easter, you do like a leg of lamb, a lamb roast, and those can be a little bit trickier to cook. They're a little bit more expensive than red meat counterparts, but lamb shanks are more affordable and they're easier to prepare in my opinion. So today we're just going straight lamb shanks. I'm gonna season them with some salt. Today I'm gonna just build, right? I'm gonna start from the basics so you can start to build flavors on top of it. Get a little oil. Now you could dry brine these a day in advance, let them sit in the fridge, really dry out, absorb that salt. That's great, but we're gonna keep it really easy today. So you can do this the day of and go right into the pot with it. The other thing about this is that lamb shanks come with the bone and the bone marrow intact. So when you braise it, it allows that bone marrow time to seep out into the sauce, adding even more flavor. Very similar to like an ossobuco. So now I'm gonna get a big Dutch oven, something heavy, something you can take from the stovetop to the oven, and something that's gonna fit the lamb. So if you're gonna make this for more people, you might need to use like a big roasting pan and just cover with foil and throw it into the oven. But for smaller batches, we can use a Dutch oven. And we're just gonna let that preheat on medium heat. So once everything's in the pot, we can just pop it right into a low oven and let it slowly cook over time. Now you wanna make sure you've got your oven preheated to 275 degrees Fahrenheit. And that Dutch oven by now should be nice and hot, and we wanna jack the heat all the way up to high. Add a little bit of oil, and then we wanna start to sear the lamb shanks. Now the lamb shanks have a bone running through them, so they're not very malleable. So you're gonna have to just do your best to fit them into the pot. So that means it's gonna be a little bit hard to get like the perfect sear right now. You could also roast them in the oven, but we're gonna use a trick halfway through this cooking process that's gonna be able to brown these beautifully in the oven. So we just want to work on developing flavor in the pot. Once they're browned enough, get them out of the pan and then add the vegetables. We want to create some caramelization on the vegetables. So we want to cook them on medium high to high for about 3 to 5 minutes. And once we start to get a little bit of browning around the edges, we want to add a couple tablespoons of that tomato paste and then work the tomato paste in and try and build a little bit of caramelization on that tomato paste as well. Once everything is browning nicely, we're starting to develop a little bit of fond on the bottom of the pan. Then we could sprinkle in that all-purpose flour and get that coated on all the vegetables and cook that for about 2-3 minutes and just cook that rawness out of the flour, and then we can deglaze with the wine. We're gonna go with about a half a bottle of wine, and we want to just stir that in nicely, and it's gonna thicken up pretty quickly. We just want to reduce that by half. We want to add the rosemary and the bay leaf, and then we can start to add in our beef stock or our brodo, whatever you're gonna use for this dish. And once the stock is in, give it a quick hit with some salt, and then we want to get the lamb shanks back in. We want to bring that up to a simmer, and once it's simmering, we want to get that lid on, and then we want to transfer the pot into the oven. We're going to cook this for about 3 to 3.5 hours, but after 2 hours, we want to check on it, take the lid off, and then we're going to cook the lamb shanks the rest of the way uncovered. This time we also want to jack the heat up to 325, get that heat a little bit higher to start to help that browning process. So now the lid is off, and we're just going to allow the meat to sort of brown. We're going to turn it every now and then. If it's not getting enough color, we might be jack the heat up a little bit. We're just playing it by ear. And while that's cooking for the last hour, hour and a half, we can start to talk about our polenta. Now, polenta is just cornmeal, coarsely ground cornmeal. And you don't need to buy a package that says polenta. Cornmeal and polenta are sort of one and the same. Sometimes there'll be a package that says polenta. Sometimes it might just be coarse cornmeal, and that will work as well. Now there's a ratio to polenta. So the ratio is just 1 cup of polenta to 5 cups of water. If you use 4 cups of water, it's gonna be thicker. And depending on the coarseness of your cornmeal, you might actually need a little bit more water than 5 cups. This is a variable, so we're just gonna kind of make adjustments as needed. But this is the base that we're going to start with. So you wanna get a nice pot onto the stove on high heat, and then we wanna add that water and a little bit of salt and bring that up to a simmer. Now we're going to use 2 main utensils for cooking the polenta. We're going to start by using this whisk, and once the polenta starts to really thicken and whisking becomes more difficult, we're going to switch to a spatula to make sure we can keep the sides of the pot clean and nothing sticks to the bottom. And once that water is simmering, we're just going to start whisking and pouring in the cornmeal. Give it a nice stir, and then we're going to put the lid on, and we're just going to let it chill for about 3 minutes, and then we're going to check on it again. While the polenta is cooking, we want to give the meat a check. We want to check for brown, and if we see one side is browning, we want to rotate so that we can kind of slowly brown each side of the lamb throughout this last hour and a half of cooking. Then we're going to go back up, we're going to take the lid off, we're going to check the polenta. And here's the thing with polenta. It's often suggested that you sit there and you constantly stir to prevent lumps and sticking to the bottom of the pan. All I'm really concerned with is the polenta sticking to the bottom of the pan. But you don't have to stand there and stir the whole time. You can put the lid on, let it cook for a little bit, and I'll wait about 3 to 4 minutes before I go and check, give it a nice whisk to loosen up anything that might be sticking to the bottom, which you'd be able to feel with the whisk, loosening everything up, and then letting it cook on its own slowly on low heat. And you just keep repeating that until the polenta is cooked. It's been another 20-30 minutes, so I'm gonna go check the lamb, rotate them, and continue browning all sides. Then I get back to checking the polenta again. And like I said, it's been about 30 minutes of cooking, so the polenta is beginning to thicken up. And this is when I'm going to switch from the whisk to the spatula. And as you can see, it's not sticking to the bottom of the pan. It's thickening. I'm not sitting there stirring all the time, and it's cooking nicely. Polenta should take anywhere from about 35 to 45 minutes, depending on the coarseness of the cornmeal that you're using. What you're looking for is for the cornmeal to become fully hydrated, to become tender and creamy. When you taste it, you should not crunch into any crunchy pieces of cornmeal. It should be fully cooked and hydrated and delicious. So you just want to cook it until you get to that point. You want to give it a taste. If it tastes like it's finished to you, then you can make some adjustments. You can add a little bit of salt. You can adjust with a 1/4 cup of water at a time if it ever tightens up on you. And once it's all good, we can put the lid on, turn the heat off, and set it off on the back burner while we finish up the rest of the meal. Now, a gremolata is just a bright garnish consisting of chopped parsley, a citrus zest, and garlic. Just about a head of parsley, and we're going to chop that fine. And then to that, we're just going to grate about 1 to 2 cloves of garlic, depending on their size. And then the zest of 1 whole lemon. We want to mix that together well. Mixing it with your fingertips helps to incorporate it a little nicely. And the gremolata is ready. By now, the lamb should have been cooking uncovered for about an hour and a half. The total cooking time has been about 3.5 hours. It will depend on the size of your lamb shanks. You want them to be tender, fork tender, no resistance when you poke them, or if you're doing an internal temp, you want them to be at least 205 degrees. Once they hit that, then we want to get them out of the pot, get them into a baking dish or a sheet tray with a little bit of the juice that they were cooking with, covered, and then back into a low oven, maybe around 250 degrees to just stay warm. Then we want to strain out the sauce into a new pan. A fine mesh strainer works best in this case, and you just want to ladle in that sauce, but you don't want to kind of smash those vegetables too much. It's going to muddy up the sauce, and we want to make it nice and beautiful and glossy at the end. Once the sauce is strained, we want to reduce the sauce and finish the polenta. While the sauce is reducing, you want to make sure you skim any fat and get that on a medium-high heat and let it reduce until it's nice and thick. Now to finish the polenta, we just want to make sure it's still nice and creamy, it's hot, nothing's sticking, there's no skin formed, it looks beautiful. And the way we just finish it is with a big knob of butter, kind of like a risotto. We just want to toss that in there, whip it in, and the butter is going to make it nice and creamy and glossy. And then we get the lid back on and let that rest in the back burner again. By now, the sauce should be nicely thickened. I'm just gonna hit it with a little bit of lemon juice just to brighten it up. And we know it's good enough to use if the sauce can coat the back of a spoon. Once it's nicely thickened, want to turn the heat off. Want to take a knob of cold butter and swirl that into the sauce. You want to swirl in these tight little circles so that you don't splash the sauce everywhere, but you can slowly melt that butter in. And once the sauce is seasoned and it tastes great, you want to get the lamb shanks out of the oven into the sauce and hit them with a final glaze. Once the lamb's nicely glazed and everything's ready to go, we plate it with a nice dollop of the polenta on the bottom of the plate, followed by a lamb shank. Then spoon over that beautiful glossy sauce. And then finish up with that gremolata on top for a nice garnish. The lamb is nice and tender, the polenta is creamy and complements the lamb nicely. And that gremolata on top just adds a little hint of flavor in the background. It's a little brightness that cuts through what is essentially a very fatty and rich piece of meat. This is a great dish to make for Easter. I hope you give it a shot. The recipe link's gonna be down in the description. That's all I have today. I'll see you next time. And until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself. Thank God it's spring, which means it's burger weather. So if you want a great chili cheeseburger recipe, I got one on the screen right now for you, along with a few other videos. Thanks for watching.